Let's move on to Texas Tech, a team that maybe underachieved in terms of, I think, people's expectations. However, this was a team that battled quarterback injuries last year, uh, kind of a switch in their offensive identity. I mean, they ran the same offense, but the tendencies certainly switched up from the first half of the season to the second half. And some of that had to do with the injury at the quarterback position, but also some of it had to do with figuring out that, wait, uh, we have a pretty good running back here. He is a really good running back. His name is Taj Boyd. Um, but the
Todd
quarterback
Brooks.
room, or sorry, Taj Boyd, that's a quarterback. Now that is a
Stud.
quarterback. Holy cow. Big time name drop. That was definitely accidental. So you look at the quarterback room, Baron Morton, and I was quick to criticize him last year. However, I've tampered my criticisms a little bit because he was dealing with an injury last year, and I do think he has the talent to be good. We just haven't seen him put it completely together, right? So that's kind of the hope for the season, the hope for this offense. However, I think this offense has some pretty good pieces that maybe you'd be willing to get into.
Yeah. So just to real quick to hit on some guys you lose, like you said, Tyler Shuck, who was the starting quarterback last year, he did get hurt. And you kind of throw Baron Martin there, who also got injured. And Morton, had to play through the injury. But Shuck is gone, and so is a couple of your receivers from last year, quote unquote top receivers like Xavier White and Jaron Bradley, Miles Price. White was pretty good. Bradley and Price, I thought disappointed. In terms of what I thought their expectation was going into the year. Bradley was a guy we were super high on. He had a great freshman year, and he really took a step back. I think that was part of the reason why, Morton also struggled. Not only his injury, but is kind of being thrown into the offense, but also that could lack in consistency from the wide receiver position. I think this year the surrounding cast around Morton is significantly better. You talked about Taj Brooks, right? And staying in that running back room. Obviously, he's going to get the bulk of the carries, right? He played almost 700 snaps last year, over 700 snaps, and holy cow, that's a lot for a running back. But yeah, him, absolute workhorse. Cameron Valdez and Cameron Dickey are two nice depth pieces, I think. Dickey's just a true freshman, and he's looked good so far. But the real strength is this wide receiver room, and it's totally overhauled from a year ago, right? You've got Coy Eakin, you've got Dre McCray, right, that are coming back from last year. They were nice, solid contributors from just a year ago. I think they're actually pretty darn good. But the real headliners are who you're bringing in, and that the alpha in that room is going to be Josh Kelly. We love Josh Kelly on this show. He was so good for Washington State last year. He fits their scheme super, super nicely. He can be a legit wide receiver one in this Big 12. Right behind him, you're also bringing in Caleb Douglas, I'm sorry, from Florida, which is a pretty nice fit to throw in there as well. And then that, everyone's excited for down there in Lubbock is Micah Hudson, right? True freshman, freak of nature. He's going to play early. I mean, he's kind of dealing with some offseason injuries and stuff like that, but McGuire and that staff has already said how he does not look like a true freshman and how good he looks and how excited they have to have him on their roster and what he can do for them. And then even the tight end position, right? Jalen Connors, that's a great get. Kind of flew under the radar, in terms of the portal window. But him and Mason Tharp, who's returning, is a big dude. Holy cow. Those are a really nice duo that they can rely on as well, not only in their run game with Tharp's size, but also give another weapon for Morton to take off the load from Kelly and Hudson and Douglas and whatnot.
Here's my thought though on this skill room and what it means, and I think that this is important, right? And you look at names, and it's really easy to be caught up with these names, but I do think, look, Jalen Conyers, Micah Hudson, and Baron Morton all missed spring practice. Okay. Those are two new connections for Baron Morton, plus the connection of Josh Kelly, right? And him, like Baron Morton not being there at spring practice, I think very much hurts this offense, especially at the beginning of the season. Fortunately, they have about a 5 game stretch where they kind of get to lean into that and really work on that chemistry. So Texas Tech is blessed in that sense. Now, if they were to go to Pullman last year, I would say that Washington State wins that game.
Mhm.
1000%. But I do think that is something that you have to look into. But I do think with the beginning of the season schedule being as easy as it is, I'm willing to kind of, I guess, not necessarily take that into as much account as I normally would, but I do think it is something important to point out.
No, that's not crazy at all. And then you're also talking about the gelling of a new offensive line, right? I mean, they lost
Mm-hmm.
what, four starters from a year ago. Caleb Rogers returns. He's pretty darn good. He started 42 games for you. Um, and so that's nice to have in the Big 12. But you're bringing in a bunch of other transfers. You got Ty Buchanan, who's transferred from a couple classes ago, former USC guy. You hope he can plug him in at right tackle, but you got Davion Carter from Memphis. You got Vinny Scurry from Toledo. You got Sterling Porcher from Middle Tennessee. Those are all guys coming up at competition level. Not only do they have to learn a new system, a new running mates along their offensive line with them and kind of gel with them, but they're also got to deal with the, upgrade in talent level that they're playing uh week to week, right? And lucky for them, like you said, they kind of start off early where they're playing a little bit more group of five talent, which is nice. You can start with Albion Christian to really get the rust off in week one. But fortunately, those guys have also started a ton of games outside of Buchanan, right? Sporcher's got 25 starts. Scurry has 32 starts. Carter has 23 starts for Memphis. I mean, that's really nice to be at least experienced, not necessarily the Big 12 experience, not necessarily experienced in the Texas Tech offense, but experience in general, I think does help, especially on the O line. And we'll see if they can, put it together and keep Baron Morton upright and create holes for Taj Brooks.
Yeah, I do want to talk about Ty Buchanan. I think, I mean, he played left tackle last year when he did play. He didn't play a ton. However, he played a lot of snaps in that Cal game. I'm trying to figure out if he actually started in that game. No, he did. Definitely started in that game. He actually played very well in that game, right? And that's some nice momentum that you got going there. A piece that you could say, yeah, sure, you're changing out left tackle, but there's a possibility that he's better than Mills was at that left tackle position. So there's a chance that he could definitely take a step there. So that game certainly is not that Cal's pass rush or not that Cal's defense was anything, substantial, but I do think if Ty Buchanan can take that step up at left tackle, I do think that that's going to be really important considering the injury history that Texas Tech has had at the quarterback position the last few years. I think that left tackle position is kind of your key. So if Ty Buchanan is good, I like it. I like it. If he's, you know, not exactly up to snuff or what we believe he can be, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this offensive line. It's always scary, having a basically a giant turnover on the offensive line and going to the transfer portal has not always supplemented that, right? You look at teams like Auburn last year, who we thought maybe this team has a shot to be pretty good. They brought up some G5 guys in the SEC, and now it just did not work for Auburn at all. Now, there were some different defensive lines that Auburn was playing that year than Texas Tech will be playing this year, but that's not to say that it won't be important.
No, absolutely. But all in all, this offense, I mean, the potential is there, right? If Morton puts it together, right? If, Micah Hudson is who we think he is, they stay healthy. Tosh Brooks especially stays healthy. That O line can gel. I think they could do good things in this, in the Big 12, but I do think there are a little too many question marks, unfortunately, at least, in this offseason.
Absolutely. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. Look, Tim DeRuyter is my guy. I love Tim DeRuyter. I thought he was a fantastic hire for Texas Tech when they hired him just a year ago to be their defensive coordinator. However, I don't know that the talent on this defense is spectacular, and I don't know they didn't play all that well last year as a defense. I mean, now some of that had to do with the offense just turning the ball over at a marvelous rate. A marvelous rate the offense turned the ball over at. All right. And that obviously has a lot of factors into your, the number of points that you allowed per game. They allowed 28 points per game as a defense, but just still, I mean, I think their secondary was okay. Uh, certainly better than I think their run defense and their front seven, but there's some new pieces there on the back end, and I don't know. I mean, I like some of these pieces on the defensive front, and I think Tim DeRuyter could potentially do a good job with them, but I think it's going to depend on some guys really taking a step forward in that front seven, and it's hard to depend on that, especially in this new Big 12. Like you would like Texas Tech is recruiting at a really high level right now, which is awesome to see in the Big 12. However, it would be nice if Texas Tech, you know, had some momentum early on in the new structure of this Big 12. I think this front seven is going to have a lot to this defense is going to have a lot to say about that, right? So
Yeah. Listen, I am a little bit concerned about the defensive the front seven in general, but I know listening to Joey McGuire Big 12 Media Days, he was talking about how excited he was for this defense to take a step. Right, Tim DeRuyter comes in, or I guess returns as well. Like you mentioned, he's a really really good guy to have as your defense coordinator. And they got McGuire was talking about they had 7 interior defensive linemen that they feel like they can rotate. I think there's depth there defensively in that front seven. I don't quite, I don't know if I see it yet. Maybe there were steps taken this offseason, like you mentioned, that needed to happen for this team, for this defense to really, gel and take a step up. I mean, you got Isaac Smith on the edge there. He's 6'6", 260. I mean, what a frame there. He needs more production. He only had 3 tackles for loss last year. He's explosive, good for him, but he's got to put it together. Maybe he did in this offseason. I don't know exactly. Joseph Adiere, right? I like him. I don't love him. I think he's unproven. We'll see what happens. It's similar to that offensive line where it's like, okay, well, I think a lot of question marks here. And then interiorly, I mean, where they talked about they had all that depth. You're looking at Quincy Ledet, Marion Banks. You bring in to Braylon Carroll, put 9 tackles for loss for Rice last year. Banks is big, 6'5", 305. Holy cow, what a great frame to have there. I mean, he fits nicely. Wow, he fits nicely next to a guy like Quincy Ledet, 6'2", 315. Maybe a guy like command the double team to eat up blocks. Doesn't quite have the production that he needs, but if you're double teaming and not getting pushed off the ball, you're doing your job there. And that's all that has to do interiorly there. So I don't know. But I still think you need more disruption. You need more production than you had a year ago. Sounds like they feel like they have it. I'm a little bit more, let's wait and see.
I think the concern that I have, I think Ben Roberts, by the way, is a fantastic linebacker there.
Yeah.
All Big 12 selection last year. If the rest of the front seven really comes together, because I'm looking at their schedule right now, and you're playing a lot of teams that aren't going to run the ball. That's just what the Big 12 is this year, right? And you're running a 3-3-5. And yes, Tim DeRuyter has had success stopping the run at other places that he's been to, but you're playing teams like Arizona State that are going to run the ball heavily. Cincinnati's going to run the ball heavily. Uh, Iowa State at the end of the season, if Abu Sama is what he is, and they could start running the ball more, right? Oklahoma State's going to run the ball a ton. West Virginia's going to run the ball a ton. So it's just such a wait and see game for me with this team. Like I think this team could be really good. I really do, and I think their over-under win total is at 7.5, and I believe that was the same win total as last year. And I think the media was a little higher on Texas Tech last year, but again, they returned a ton of pieces. I mean, sure, the losses were headlined by the receivers that you lost and your quarterback Tyler Shuck, but I mean, they return a ton. They return a ton. So, did you want to maybe touch on the secondary a little bit, which has some pieces, but maybe not the depth that I mean, maybe some depth, but just not. You know what I'm saying?
No in depth. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, well, the headliner CJ Baskerville, he comes back. I think he's probably their best player in the secondary. Right? He was pretty good for them at safety last year. His running mate, Adrian Taylor Demerson, right? He's off the NFL. He's a pretty good player in his own right.
It's all Big
Um,
12. Tyler
oh,
Owens is out of there as well. Not that
yep.
Tyler Owens was fantastic, on film, but uh, he's pretty talented.
He played almost 600 snaps for you. Like that's still, a veteran, very good athlete, like you said, talented, that's gone. And then another headliner is probably at least a known commodity, Braylon Lux, right? He's a good returner for you. He's a former Fresno State transfer back in 2023. He played almost 600 snaps for you. He had good production, right? He graded out pretty darn well as well. So it's nice to have at least a cornerstone to have, in the safety room and then your cornerback room as well. After that, though, you've got, you know, some experienced guys. You got guys coming over from Canada and Devin Cromwell from in your cornerback room. Maureen Horn. I mean, he's like I said, they've recruited well, but he's a former four-star guy, but he's inexperienced. Can he step up? Can he take that next step? How does it work out for them? And then probably going to be Chapman Lewis, right, in your safety room as well, pairing with CJ Baskerville, right? Doesn't have a ton of experience. I think they like him back there, but I don't know how um, much he's going to, be an impact player this year, right? And then AJ McCarty is probably going to be your star nickel hybrid linebacker. Doesn't have a ton of experience, but it was a little bit. The problem is he's kind of small to be. I mean, I get like you're playing nickel, you got to cover, the slot receivers too. But if we talk about the running game and stopping the run, you're 6 foot 195, and I know it. He's obviously they feel confident enough to put him in there, but wouldn't you like a little bit more size in your big nickel spot, and you're almost like your other linebacker in there on the field, right? If you're trying to stop the run. So we'll see how it is, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think they could move around some pieces as the season goes along. I don't think anyone besides really CJ Baskerville and Braylon Lux are kind of uh in set spots. I do think though that the upside of the secondary is higher than the rest of these position groups. Am I correct in saying that? I know it's young, but I think the upside certainly is there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason. I mean, they didn't take that many transfers, right? They took a kid from a D3 that, I'm sorry, Cornwall, right from Canada, and then they took Javion Wilcox, right, who's who's a freshman, so year one going into year two guy. So they obviously must feel pretty good about the returning guys that are ready to step into, this their new role, their more, enlarged role this coming season. So I don't know. I think outside looking in, I think it's hard to just predict that. But regardless, so we'll see.
Yeah, I do think I'll say this like I guess for special teams, but I think it impacts the defense as well. I mean, Texas Tech punted and they averaged 46.3 yards per punt, which was 11th in the country, right? I mean, when you look at their special teams game last year in terms of actually punting, Austin McNamara was one of the best punters in the entire country. He was. He graded out like top 5 on PFF. Again, he was top 15 in punt yards average. He's gone. They're bringing a transfer from Weber State. I don't know. I don't know how good he is. I think he averaged like 42 yards a punt. But the downgrade there, I think people don't think about it. When they think about college football teams, they don't think about some of those big time punters, but some of those big time punters make a huge difference. I mean, you look at Tor Taylor for Iowa, right? I think about J.K. Scott back in the day for Alabama. Um, there have been some really good punters that have had the ability to absolutely flip the field and put your defense in a much better position. I mean, look at a team like Texas A&M last year. They had a huge downgrade or a regression from the punter, and it costed them some games. It really did. So I think it's something that you can't just scrape over, of course, but maybe not as important as some of the other spots here that have been replaced or you're anticipating getting replaced. I want to look at the schedule here. I'll run through it. Abilene Christian week 1 at home. Then you go to Pullman to play Washington State. Then you get North Texas at home, Arizona State at home, Cincinnati at home, Arizona on the road. Then you have a bye. You get Baylor at home, at TCU, at Iowa State, Colorado at home. Bye week. You go at Oklahoma State, and then you get West Virginia at home. I would say not a terrible schedule.
No, I mean,
More
looking at
friendly than last year's schedule, I think.
yeah, I mean, you don't have to play Oregon, which is nice. You don't have to play Wyoming, which is nice. And
In
yeah,
Laramie,
yeah, you're looking at teams they missed out on in the Big 12. I mean, Kansas State, even UCF, right?
Utah.
Utah. Those are all teams that you don't necessarily want to be playing this year, and you miss out on. And even like the way that the road home games split in terms of like your win total, maybe in terms of winning the Big 12, doesn't lend towards that. But you got at Arizona, right on the road, and at Oklahoma State. Those are probably two of your harder games, and at Iowa State, probably three of your hardest games within the conference. They're all on the road anyways. So your other home games are going to be against more favorable teams that you should win. And it makes it even more easier to win those games if they're at home and kind of bolster up your win total in terms of that production. Obviously, if you're Joey McGuire, if you're Texas Tech fans, you want to win every single game, right? And you want to compete for Big 12 championships like you should. But the reality is it's kind of favorable. It's not, I don't think it's crazy.
Yeah, I look at this 7.5 win total. I let me tell you, when I say I'm lost on a win total, there's a couple of these in the Big 12, actually a lot
Yeah.
more in the Big 12 than I think other conferences that I'm kind of lost on. I really don't know how this team's going to look because I think we didn't really get this team at full strength last year. So I think like I'm going to take the under on this win total at 7.5 at plus 100. I'm not going to actually bet it, right? None of these are we're betting. That's for a different video, a later video that y'all are going to have to watch. But I think the uncertainty of the offensive line is a big factor. The I don't believe that the front seven is going to be as good as the coaching staff. I hope, but here's the thing: they're a coaching staff and they know what they have inside the building. I could be wrong about both of those things, right? Ty Buchanan could end up being an awesome left tackle. That defensive line could end up being fantastic. Um, their secondary, the young secondary steps up, right? Like all of these things can happen. And if all of those things happen, Texas Tech is a very, very dangerous team because I do think this offense is going to be very good. At least the weapons on the offense, right? Texas Tech is plus 1,400 to win the Big 12, according to DraftKings, which puts them at eighth in terms of odds. I mean, you said I think teams 1 through 10 have a legitimate chance of winning the Big 12. Teams 1 through 10.
Wild.
So Texas Tech, just because I'm saying that you're going to go under, do not. First of all, if you're new here at Texas Tech and you're ready to hate on me, just know this: I am the biggest Joey McGuire fan that you will ever meet. That is not a Texas Tech Red Raider fan. All right, I am a huge Joey McGuire fan. I've consistently drafted him in Chris and I's coaches drafts higher than maybe what I'm supposed to be or his uh, value pick, or the value of his pick or whatever. Dude, Joey McGuire is awesome. He is doing wonderful things there. But if it doesn't happen this year, that doesn't mean that it's not happening in future years. I am high on Texas Tech and the future of that program out there in Lubbock.
I want to echo you exactly. I'm going to take the under as well, just because to me there's too many question marks, and there's other known commodities within the Big 12 that you're going to have to play that you're just not. Yeah, so it's a shame. It's a shame, but I listen. I like you said, the ceiling on this team is pretty darn high. I even think the floor, just bringing in a guy like Cameron Brown, having Jake Strong and Will Hammond, two young guys in your quarterback room, I still think the quarterback. I'm sorry, the floor on this team isn't like bottoming out, right? Even if things don't go right. Just because of the way that the schedule kind of works out in your favor, but I don't see 8-4 more as the most likely scenario in terms of 7-5. I don't know. But regardless, like you said, it doesn't mean that I'm low on Joe McGuire. It doesn't mean that I don't think he's doing things the right way. I just think it's also a pretty young team in key spots. And we'll see what happens this year and how much, they can really improve from a year ago. But yeah, I to me, we'll see about the defense and all the holes in it. And then we'll see if the O line can hold up and Morton can take a step and be healthy. But this
Agreed.
is definitely a fun team to watch this year and going forward as well.